Okay, so we are recording, and I have with me here, it's a really treat. It's actually in line with the way we've been doing things so far. Jonathan has a whole presentation that he's going to talk to you about uh, the career and some other really cool stuff, and then we're going to get in and talk kind of nuts and bolts about all of this stuff. But Jonathan, why don't you introduce and just what do you do right now for work?
Well, I'm currently a texture artist for Ubisoft. I arrived in Quebec something like 8 or 9 months ago now, and I started about 12 years ago in the video game industry. So I worked for Quantic Dream on productions such as Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls
Mm-hmm.
as environment artist. Then I went to Guerrilla Games in Netherlands to work on Horizon Zero Dawn.
Yeah.
And then I came back in France to work on Ghost Recon Wildlands, still as environment artist. And yeah, now I'm in Quebec, and I switched as texture artist full time.
Great.
So
What does
yeah.
a texture artist do? Because one of the things that I find in environments, it's a little different than character, but with environments, there's so many directions to go in.
Yeah.
What does a texture artist?
Well, well, as texture artist, you need to create, well, textures, of course,
Hmm?
but it's more a collaborative work with modeler. So, for instance, you need to make a kit for a set of building. So you need to work with them to define what sort of trim he needs,
Mm.
what sort of tileable texture he needs. So if you're making, I don't know, bricks, maybe you will need different sort of bricks. You need to see with him how he's gonna blend the texture together, depending of the shader and where you're working, of course, depending of the engine.
Yeah.
But it's pretty different. But you can really go more in depth into texturing, because when I used to be environment artist, I was involved into texture production, but I didn't have that much time to push the things forward. So now it's pretty different. I'm really focused on this, and I really enjoy it so far.
Now, one of the texturing is important to me in this conversation now because it used to be a lot of environment and projections and things of that nature.
Hmm.
But talk to me about some of the changes that have happened. Like sometimes in environment artists, they do the modeling and the texturing for the most part. But now, as a
Yeah.
texture artist, like what are some of the things that you do now that maybe before were done, with modeling?
Well, now I could say that the 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 texturing became really more complicated than before. It involved a lot of more knowledge.
Hmm.
So you need to before designer and painter, you really needed to mastering very well ZBrush to make PBR textures, stuff like that, or Photoshop.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Now I think it involves a lot of knowledge of different program, and it's not like, few years ago it was just like taking a bitmap and cropping it and just using some brushes in Photoshop, and it was done. Now it's very different, and the console are really powerful. We can produce texture in 4K or 2K. So you have a lot of resolution, and you really need to spend time on the texture now.
Got it. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, and does the texture artist, is this involving terrain much?
Well, in my case, I'm specifically working on architecture at the moment, but
Hmm.
yes, you can definitely make materials for the terrain, such as sand or mud or whatever.
Right.
You can also make texture sometime for props. Depends of what they need at work. But you need to be able to make a lot of different textures. So organic stuff and also art surface stuff.
Great. Talk to me a little bit about your education. Where did you go to school, and what was the first job, and a little bit about how you got there?
It was, yeah, I think now 15 years ago. Wow, I'm getting old, man.
I both.
Yeah, I started I went to an art school in Paris called Lisa, where I stayed for 3 years. And originally, I wanted to go in the CG industry. So it was more making renders, stuff like that in Maya. Then I just had opportunities in the video game, and I started as a concept artist. So I started as an intern for a few months. Then I made some tests in 3D because I really wanted to do 3D.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, this is how I started in the video game. And in my first company, I worked on smaller project on like the previous generation of console, like the PS2, the Wii, and all this, previous console. So it was fun to learn like that on smaller project. And now that I'm working on AAA game, it's really bigger, and it's a big machine.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Now, Susan mentioned that you've got something prepared for us. Should I keep asking questions, or do you have something you wanted to start?
Well, I can no, I can start right now. Wanted to maybe show you a couple of render before. Maybe you're interested by seeing some of my previous work. Can show you a couple of render if you want.
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right. Just gonna take a look at this. So, yeah, maybe gonna drop that here. All right. So yeah, just to show you some of my work quickly. So I made a couple of personal work because I think it's always interesting um, to keep pushing things further when you have some free time.
Mm-hmm.
So at work, I know what I have pretty short timing usually. So you're producing stuff with a schedule, and you have a timeline, you have milestone, and you need to deliver things pretty quickly. But when I have time, I love to push things further and experiment things. So this is what we're gonna see with this project today. So I'm gonna show you this later in Designer, but this is the sort of project that I like to do when I have some free time.
And for those who are listening to just audio, we're talking about Jonathan's ornate column with the skulls and the ornamentation, and quite a complicated piece.
Yeah, and yeah, more recently I worked on some desert rock stuff, just to push a bit more what I was capable of doing with Designer in terms of organic textures.
Yeah.
So it's always to it's always like a study when I work on project like that on the side, is really to improve some specific some yeah sorry, I had an issue with my headphone.
Yeah, we hear you okay though.
Yeah, so as I said, it's just to challenge me and try to study different elements that I can't really study at work.
Right.
Sorry. So yeah, so as I said, I worked on different games. So here is more environment work that I've done when I was in Paris. Um, you can take a look at my art station if you have some time and if you're interested to see more stuff. I've also made a couple of tutorial for 3D Artist, the magazine, on different subject textures, assets such as like this gun, or it's very interesting to make tutorials out of project like that, I think, because it's also a good way for you to just go back to your work and just look at the different step, and it's also a good way to learn once again.
I think one of the things that drew me to you was that foliage generator.
Oh,
Level
cool.
80.
This one. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And if you don't mind, I'd love to chat about that, because if I remember right, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I could have my data mixed up, but you have some parameters within Substance that allow you to change things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that one of the things that is important to me in terms of artists in this game industry is really capitalizing on the stuff that's really new and important. And so, how important is Substance Designer to an aspiring game artist today, in your eyes?
Well, I think it changed a lot when Uncharted 4 was released.
Mm-hmm.
I think people sort of realized that you could use Substance Designer on huge production like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it really became something very important nowadays in the video game industry. It's like
Right.
it's like Photoshop before, but now everybody's using Substance because you can really speed up your process when you use this program, especially when you can like create generators and stuff like that. You can like really radically win a lot of time. So yeah, on this project was just once again just a personal study. I wanted to just create a leaf, and in the end I ended up with a generator. So basically, not going to show you everything, but just to show you the good example here, when I create a mask in entry, in input, I directly have the result that you see here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I get this weird shape.
Yeah.
But that's very cool how you can manipulate the different nodes in Designer. It's really just a big toolbox that you can use in many manner. It's a lot of experimentation as well, but yeah, that's a very powerful tool, and it's hard nowadays to don't use it in game production.
So it's pretty common, pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Okay, great. How important is it, do you think it is for a beginner to have skills in that? Is it something that is for people who are already in the industry, or is it a real leg up and a door opener?
Well, I think it's good even for a beginner to learn Designer, because um, this is the industry is just moving in this direction. So if you directly learn the program, I think it's gonna be just a plus for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like learning Unreal, I think today it's just normal to start by learning Unreal, because this is something really common. You can find this engine in maybe half of the company in the world. I don't know, but everybody's using Unreal, and everybody's using Substance Designer, like everybody's using ZBrush as well.
Right.
So I think it's just the common tool that you need to learn, and I think it's Designer became really part of this core program that you need to know, like Maya or 3ds Max.
Right. Totally. Got it. Great. Okay. And so, what other software do you think it's important for beginners, people who are looking to get into this? What else? What else is important for them to know? We got Substance Designer. We got ZBrush. Obviously, they need Maya or Max.
Yeah. I think it's already good. If you're good
Okay.
at this 3 or 4 program, I think you already have quite a lot.
And how does it fit in with Substance Painter? Because that's obviously the much friendlier
Yeah.
program. But how does that connect with Substance Painter? And I get, just before you answer that, I get several responses on this because there are people environment artists, who just love Substance Painter, and I was interviewing James Raitosa, who does a lot in Substance Designer, but then
Hmm.
nowadays he finds himself mostly just using Painter because you can make smart materials in Painter too, and it's just powerful. But how does Painter fit into this equation for you?
Well, in my case, I usually use Painter on props or assets.
Yeah,
So, for example, I use Substance Painter to make this gun.
yeah,
It was a 2D, just again, just to see how I could use the program. So I went into very very small details just to try. I tried to replicate like the exact feeling that I had on the surface of a gun,
yeah.
but nothing has been made in Designer on this project. Everything has been made in Painter for the texture part.
Okay.
And just to show you another example, for this helmet, I've done everything in Designer. Um, so all the materials have been made in Designer
Mm-hmm.
and have been applied on the asset. So it's just you can pretty much do the same thing, but it's another approach. Uh, Today, I'm really using Designer for tileable texture,
Yeah.
and once when I bake an asset like a car or maybe I don't know, hard surface stuff like this helmet for example,
Yeah.
uh, I will definitely use Painter. This was an experiment, so I made it with Designer, but I know I could go way faster with Painter, and it totally depends of the sort of asset that you need to texture.
Okay.
If it's an asset, it's better with Painter or character, and if it's for I don't know, you need to build a facade of a building, it's better to break it into tileable texture and to make it in Designer.
Okay, great. So Painter definitely for props and for getting stuff out quick. But like if I'm
Yep.
looking at this helmet that you have here, like it's a ton of materials, a ton of individual parts and things
Yeah.
of that nature. So is it fair to say that one of the benefits of Substance Designer is it's like you're creating your kit that you can then, you know, almost kit bash materials together in the way that we do kit bashing with models.
Yeah, exactly. On that project, especially, this is exactly what I was doing. So I've created a couple of different materials, carbon fiber, more matte paints, glossy paints, stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Then I just played with mask in Designer to just apply my different materials on the part that I wanted.
Got it. Okay, that makes total sense.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, if you don't mind, I'd love to dive into Substance because I think you have something you can show us there too, right?
yeah, yeah. So just to show you again, so this is one of the project that I've done a few months ago now.
Hmm.
So it's an ornate column that I made fully in Designer.
Yeah.
Um, so just to show you different angles. All right. So um, as you can see here, it's just a height map used in Marmoset. So I just used my texture in Marmoset. So it's just a cylinder, so you don't have any modeling. It's just a cylinder with displacement and tessellation.
Okay.
So the
So
main
just simple
focus.
cylinder, and then you're just inside a Substance Designer, you're setting it to tessellate.
Yeah, but actually in Marmoset you can directly set the amount of tessellation that you want. So you increase the amount of polygons.
Sorry, it's
And
in Marmoset you're setting that. Okay, got it. Yeah.
It's in Marmoset. You can do it in Designer as well, but for render it's better to use a Marmoset tool bag.
Totally.
I just forgot to mention it. Sorry. But as you can see, the height map is very, very important because when you use displacement, the white information are going to be the peaks and the black information are going to be the valley. So it's really important to spend time on the height map because this is how you're going to generate your volumes. And it's also going to be the main map that you're going to use to extract all your information to create your albedo, your roughness, your normal, and so on.
Yeah. So so right now we're looking at your substance. How many nodes are in this?
Well, I have no idea, man. I'm just gonna show you the file. So it's a bit big, but
It's a bit.
you will see it's not that complicated.
No, this doesn't look complicated at all. All right, so walk me through, because I know the key with Designer. Number one, it's nodal, so it's
Yeah,
all about the graph. So
exactly.
the first thing is, actually the first thing is really probably going to start with details, and then we'll go back to this. But like the first thing is how do you get skulls? Are you putting
Well,
geometry, alphas? Like how is that working?
well, for this cause, as the main target here was to try to experiment architecture stuff in Designer.
Mm-hmm.
I just use ZBrush to speed up my process. I could have done my skulls directly in Designer because it's possible to make it in Designer using shapes. But I just use ZBrush for this. So just to show you here, this is just a Z grab then I took from ZBrush, and just to show you a couple of height map there. So here is a folder where I captured a couple of different bones and skulls, and I just played around using tile sampler in Substance Designer.
Some of those look familiar. Is that from the anatomy model in ZBrush?
Yeah, exactly.
Sweet.
I didn't spend time to on the sculpt because
Yeah.
I really wanted to, I wanted to explore stuff in Designer. So I was like, okay, let's grab a free skeleton on the internet. So I went on batking.com.
Yeah.
And I just took a skeleton and I grabbed some height map from this model.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Sweet. Okay, so all right, so that was in my mind, alphas, and let's get back to just how you go about the thinking process, because I know structure. This is basically a programming language, just a visual language. So structure's key. How do you think that through?
Well, in our case, we wanted to create a dark fantasy ornate column. So I wanted to integrate elements such as cornices, bones, skulls, gemstones, gold, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I when I started to sing about it, I was like, okay, first I need to collect references because it's always important to have references.
Right.
Then I was like, okay, let's start to structure the column with the horizontal shapes, and naturally it was like, okay, to just help me to place all these elements together and to just help me to make that composition, creating the cornices first is probably the best idea. So this is how I started. So basically, I can show you how I created this. So I used a node called the curve node.
Okay.
That's very powerful. So basically here you can create points along a curve. So I'm just gonna create a new one just to show you the difference. So if I create the curve node from scratch, here it is. So here you have nothing for now because we just have 2 points. But if I start just
so first, if I can interrupt, first you're starting with a gradient.
Sure. Yeah, I start with a gradient linear.
Yeah.
Then I plug that into a curve node.
Yeah. Got it. I understand now. Yep.
And here, that is pretty much like you were drawing the profile of your cornice.
Yeah.
So I'm manipulating the points, and you really have a lot of control there. You can align the points in the bottom, in the middle. You can just let me undo this. You can like flip vertically, mirror horizontally. You can do a lot of things, and it's really handy, and you can iterate very quickly with this node.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, the first step is this. So then I used transform 2D nodes to change the thickness of my cornice. And just a little details, you need to set the tiling mode to horizontal tiling only, because if you don't do this, if I just create another one from scratch, oops. So if I show you, if I change the thickness, see what happened? Everything is tiling right now. So you need to go there in the tiling mode, change it to absolute, then switch to horizontal tiling only. So in Designer, you have a lot of parameters like that in the nodes that you need to know, but it's very handy to use this one. All right. So I'm gonna keep going with this if you want.
That'd be great.
Yeah. So here I'm blending together my different cornices. I'm gonna come back later on that vertical line there because it's a detail that I've added at the end when I was almost done with everything. So here I keep adding cornices by blending my transform 2D together. So here it's in Max Leadon. Here too. I'm just gonna change to display the links differently. Here's the same thing. I'm adding columns together, cornices together, sorry. Here I'm using a level node to adjust the range of my height map. Here I'm just adding a mask on top of the result that I have here, just to slightly change the elevation of the two cornices in the center. I could use just a level, but here I used two mask. Here is the same. I just added this detail afterward, but here I'm just adding some. It's very subtle, but if you take a look at it, you can see little damages. So the slope blur is a node that can be used in many different manners, but you can create damage effect with it. So for instance, I'm gonna show you another example just to explain how it works. So I've got my cloud tool already, but I'm gonna create a blur. All right, I'm gonna create a blur and slow blur there. All right. So basically, if I turn this down, all right. Okay, so here is what you get if you just push too far the intensity there. So when you blur a noise with a blur node, it creates artifacts that once fed in slow blur will generate sort of erosion effect, and the blur intensity there gives you the control on how chiseled the noise is. So if you push this parameter there, I'm just gonna lower down the intensity. Do you see the difference? It's just smoother. More I push the intensity of the blur, more it's getting smooth.
Yeah.
And now it's more chisel. And the intensity of the slow blur there is controlling the propagation of the effect. So you can play with the both parameter to find the good balance, and usually it's good to use it softly like that to have sort of erosion effect. I can show you with a normal node maybe.
Okay.
Just to quickly show you. All right. So do you see what happened?
Totally. Yeah, just got a great look. And so this is, so you use the gradient to just provide, let's say the palette, the color palette. Then the curve, you take that palette and you move it around and you say, I'm going to put black here and I'm going to put gray here. And, you establish like the profile of the column.
Exactly.
Okay, and then you come in and you do these 2D transform nodes. And I got a little confused about what the 2D transform nodes are. But in essence, they're taking whatever that is and you're kind of localizing an area that you then want to, or isolating an area that you then want to adjust. Is that an accurate way to say that?
Well, the Transform 2D allow you to manipulate a shape. So you can move it, you can rotate it, you can scale it, you can do whatever you want with the Transform 2D. So you always use it in a graph because it's the only way to move a shape to position, basically.
Okay. And you're using it to, say, isolate the area of the column that's, let's say, 3 feet up. And you use a different node to isolate the area that's 4 feet up. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Here I'm basically just creating the layout of my column. So I'm by using my currents, I'm just defining the space that I'm gonna let free to create my bas relief.
Got it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, and then along those lines, you've got the tools to kind of erode the edges and to start to establish the stone.
Yeah, exactly. So these little details has been added further. It was during the micro detail pass. I'm going to talk about it later, but yeah, just gonna keep going there. So here I'm adding, still other cornices. Here I'm just subtracting a rectangle shape there with a level to create just some more space, and here I'm really playing with the elevation, And as I said, I'm trying to find interesting spaces to place my other elements. Here, I'm adding other details there. So I'm basically adding columns, cornices on top of other cornices to add more and more details to it and to create variation. So here, as you can see, there's another one I placed there. Here, another one there. All right. So once my layout is done, I started to add and subtract smaller shapes on my cornices. So I'm going to show you with a normal node again. It's easier. So here we have this. So here's what we have currently. So now I'm just gonna add little details using a shake node. So the shake node allows you to create a lot of different primitive. So when you click here, you have a big list of different elements that you can just use. So paraboloid, bell, Gaussian, torn, whatever. And here I use a tile sampler. Just let me show you this. All right. So the tile sampler is a very important node because it allows you to do a lot of things in Designer. It's a bit scary to use it at the very beginning, to be honest, because you have a lot of parameters and it's hard to understand at the very beginning, but it's very powerful. You have a lot of input that you can plug in, like the mask map input that I will show you later. The rotation map inputs, you have a lot of things that can be useful, but here I'm just using it to make my shape tile. And I just, here I just adjust a bit my shape, creating a bevel with a bevel node. So I feed that in a tile sampler, then I get this now. See, got a line of, pattern. I use a transform 2D to adjust the position, a level to adjust the depths. Then I blend that using a blend node. And here it's the same, but I just used another level and another transform to just place somewhere else my details. So using my normal, just let me show you again. Here is what you get.
Nice, nice. And this is really this is a slow, methodical building process.
Exactly. Yeah, totally.
Great.
So in the next step here, I'm subtracting square shapes. So I use a square using the same node. It's exactly the same process than before. It's a shape node, so square, beveled, plugged into a tile sampler. Here I'm just adding some damages on the squares. I use transform 2D to place them, a level.
You're adding those edges with that noise technique that you talked about, right?
Exactly, yeah. So I'm damaging the edges there of my shape.
Yeah,
just
a
to
noise
create some.
in what is that? A shape blur, or what was that node above?
It's called slow blur.
Slow blur. Great.
Yeah, and yeah. Once again, I'm just gonna show you with the normal because in the height map it's very subtle. But you can see, you know, a little variation there to break just the straight lines. And yeah, so now I added some circular ornaments. But before to take a look at this, I'm just gonna show you how I created this shape there. So once again, I used one of my cornices there. Then I plugged into a node called Cartesian to Polar, and it allows you to create these sort of shapes and combine with a gradient like that. You know, you can have a very cool circular shape. Here I combine that with a paraboloid, so it's, you know, a shape set on paraboloid, and I got this shape there. So this shape is going to be used after to be I'm going to use it as a stand for my gemstones. But here I decided to play around with it, and I was experimenting, and I found a very cool shape using a tile sampler, and I get this result in the end.
Was that planned, or you said you found that shape?
Sorry.
Did you say you planned it, or you just were playing and then it kind of came about?
Oh no, sorry. Yeah, I was playing around with the tile sampler and this shape, and I was looking for a cool pattern because I wanted to, you know, create circular ornaments, but I wasn't sure what sort of ornaments I wanted.
Right.
So I was just experimenting things and playing around with the scale, and here you can adjust the blending mode there. So if I duplicate the node, I can just show you the different effect that you can have. Just gonna show you this quickly. If you change to add sub, you have different effects here. Can also adjust the color. So it's very easy to do various effects, but you just need to find the good combo to make what you want in Designer. It's just like a big toolbox with a lot of tools, and just have to play around with it and find your own recipe. So here, this is how I get this. Then I'm blurring just the center part, just transforming it, blurring the part there, making a mask out of it, and just placing it there. All right, and just to show you on the normal, this is what I got here. All right. So here I'm using again the same ornaments, but I'm just placing it there just to add a micro detail in there. I'm already going into details because I knew that my cornices would not move anymore. So I was like, okay, I can at least like place a couple of little details there, but you know, I could have waited later on to do it, but I was pretty sure that I was not going to move them anymore, so that was okay. There for the black gem raw, so this line there, I used my stand there, then I plugged into a tile sampler. use the transform 2D. It's pretty much always the same method, but it's just you're just slowly combining shapes together. And here I just adding my gemstone. So for the gemstones, I found it easier to make it in Maya basically. So I used a gem cutting chart just to see how was sculpted exactly a diamond, and I used it as reference to make this quickly in Maya. I could have done it in Designer as well, but it was just easier to make it and to grab it in ZBrush. So here once again I use a tile sampler and I plug it into a transform 2D. Use a level. Here I create a mask with an histogram scan, and I add my gemstone on top of my little stand. And here is the raw of gem that you have here. Here it is. All right, so for the next step, it was making the bas relief here, the first raw. So here I used one of my skulls. Then I slow blurred to you know, give some erosion effect to it. And here I blend my result, so the eroded version with the normal version. And in the mask here, I'm using just a gradient to erase the effect on the face of the skeleton. So if you look at it, it's pretty subtle, but you can see that here there is not that much erosion. So I've done this on two different skulls. So this is the same skull, but they're eroded differently. So it's just to break a bit more the tiling and the repetition. Here again, I'm using a tile sampler. Then I blend here. I'm just gonna show you a bit more what's going on. So here I just use a stand again. Then I blur slightly just to make it smoother. And I blend that. So I set my tile sampler differently, and I just put them next to each other. I'm gonna show you later for this mask. And here, once again, I'm using a tile sampler just to let you know about this. Previously, I used a shape node that I plugged into a tile sampler. You need to know that you can set a pattern here. So here I use a square, but it's just that if you need to do manipulation on the shape, like here I'm adding a bevel, you can't do it directly in the tile sampler. So that's why I'm using a shape node there with a square. But I could have used a square directly in the tile sampler. So it works again. Depends on what you want. And here it's the case. I'm using the bevel after the tile sampler instead of doing it before. So it's just an example that you can do the same thing but differently. So here I'm blending the both shape together. I'm basically adding my skulls on top of the square. Here I'm adding my gems, and I'm placing them on top of my stand, just like before. So there, using an histogram scan to create a mask out of my tile sampler there. And I place my gem on top of my stand there. And there you go.
Very cool.
And there, I'm just creating a mask to display, because here, as you can see, it has been plugged into multiple tile samplers. So you have a lot of different lines, and you don't want to use them all. So I'm just, you know, masking out the one I want.
Got it.
And the mask is just created with one of my, previous garnets that I claimed that was an histogram. But I could have created this mask with a square node, with a shape node, using a square or whatever. I was there. Let me show you the result. So it's the normal node. Here it is. All right. So for the second row, it's more or less the same recipe, but with other elements. So here, I'm creating a sort of demonic eye by using a paraboloid and a level. Then I transform, and then I subtract with my stand. Once again, I could have created different elements for my different pattern, but I just reused the same over and over again because I just wanted to stay focused on the design instead of creating too much variety. And it's also a good way to stay consistent with the shapes. So yeah, I just adjust the level here.
I love
here
how
I'm placing
it all just kind of combines in. It's like 3 or 4 nodes, and you get these amazing shapes.
Yeah, it's very, very easy to use. Actually, you just need to learn a bit what node is doing what, basically. But in the end, it's always more or less the same stuff that you do. Here I'm using the same technique than before to erode my jaw. So I'm just using 2 different clouds to have different sort of erosion. So you can see here that this one is different than the other one. Here is really to create variety and to break the tiling. So here I'm doing this with this tile sampler, and here the jaw is on the other side. Here I'm adjusting the level, and I'm blending the both shape together in Kingslien. And here I'm adjusting the eye between the 2 jaws. I'm adjusting the position with the transform 2D. And here it's pretty much the same than on the previous row. I'm using skulls. So I added these details, so the star has been added afterward, but now it's already there. But I'm using again the same technique. So erosion, I adjust the level slightly, and I plug that in a tile sampler. I blur it a bit, and I blend everything together in Kingslien again. And here I'm masking out my skulls just to avoid to create a sort of outline around it. And there it's the same, creating a mask just to display my bare leaf where I want, to don't have it everywhere like that. So here it is for the second row. And for the last one, I started to create just a mask using a shape node. So use a transform, blur it slightly, and I subtracted just to create to add more depth into what we have here. So for the top row, I started by using the backbone. So it's like when I started the graph. I started with the horizontal element, sorry, and now I'm structuring the final bas relief with the vertical lines first. So just to help me to see a bit more the space that I have. So here I'm blending my backbone with a gradient linear 2. Then I transform like that just to add a bit more roundness to it. And here I plug that into tile sampler. I blur it slightly. I adjusted it with the level. And here I'm duplicating my tile sampler, but instead of having my backbone plugged in pattern input, I just use one of the pattern that you can find here. So I set it to ridge bell, and I combine the two together just to add some more sharpness to the spine there. And it's also pretty visible when you look at the silhouette over there. And it's always good when you're working on a texture like that, when you use displacement and tessellation, to think about your texture as not as a 2D texture, but as a volume. Because in the end, it's going to be seen on a primitive like that with tessellation. So it's always good to preview it. All right. So here, once again, I'm adding the backbones to my composition. Just gonna plug that back with my normal there. Right. Okay, so here is what we have. Here I'm doing pretty much the same thing once again with the tile sampler, except that here I'm using a mask that I'm creating from my previous tile sampler there. So I use my backbones to create a mask that I'm inverting with my selection, and I plug that into my mask map input. Here in the tile sampler, you can, just gonna show you the parameter. Here you have a mask map threshold, and when you change this value, you can decide where you wanna spread your elements. So basically, here the tile sampler is not spreading skulls where you have your backbones there. And by adjusting the threshold, you adjust the sort of virtual bounding box around the mask. So it works pretty well. So you can constrain the skulls where you want. And here I'm slightly playing with the rotation random to break the repetition once again. So you can see here it's rotated slightly. All right, so they're playing with my level to integrate that into the composition again, and here's what you have. So on that part, I'm gonna go a bit faster, but it's basically just playing around with simple shapes to create create details for the background. So first here, just subtracting pyramid shapes. So here's what you got. I'm just gonna show you quickly. So here it doesn't, doesn't work that well, but combined with the rest, it works pretty well actually. So here I'm just playing around with pyramids in a tile sampler. I chop off the top with an histogram scan by playing around with the values there. I'm adjusting the depth to the level, combining my gemstone. Here I'm adding just a torn pattern, because here I'm, as you can see, you have torns and gems. So I'm creating the both version. So here you have the torn, here you have the diamonds. Here I'm masking out just the area that I want to keep. And here it's a bit gross, but I'm just creating a shaker mask quickly by hand. And I'm just, displaying the other ones that I want. So a gemstone, then a torn, then a gemstone. And here I'm just masking my pyramids with my bone elements, just to avoid to superimpose them. Yeah, here I'm masking out the results. Here I'm just adding gradient linear 2 just to add more roundness to it. It's subtle, but it helps a bit just to make it fit better there. And I'll blend everything together. And we're almost done now. So now it's gonna be just small details such as inscription. So it's pretty easy to do. I just used a text node, so you can enter text there and can make it type pretty easily. So here it is. So it's pretty cool to use. And the height is almost finished. Here there's just a couple of different noise that I'm using to add variation. So here I'm just creating scratches with a generator. I'm warping it with directional warp. I'm using the slow blur again to create this very cool erosion effect. And I'm subtracting the shape to my result. And just to show you on the normal, it looks like this.
That's beautiful.
And before it was like that,
Yeah. We've got Lance is asking about how you get the grayscale. Do you mind just talking about what the grayscale is versus the normal one that you're using to show us? That one.
What do you mean exactly? I'm not sure to understand the question. Sorry.
The grayscale connectors that you have, the height map, basically the height maps.
Yeah, this one. You mean this map?
Yeah. So Lance was asking. Lance was asking different questions about the bones and skulls. So Lance, he got those from ZBrush, or he got them from Bad King, but they're basically depth grabs from ZBrush.
Yeah, exactly. So you can sculpt it yourself, or you can Z grab a free asset or whatever, you know. It's just to have a base that I used in Designer, just to, yeah, once again, just save some production time. It was not really the focus to learn how to sculpt a skeleton in ZBrush. It was more about how can I use this shape to make a composition like that in Designer. So was the focus of that's 2D. But yeah, it was from ZBrush, grabbed in ZBrush. I don't have loaded the file, but it's pretty easy to do it. So here's the final height. Oh, sorry, I skipped a couple of notes, but here basically I'm just subtracting and adding little noise. Just gonna show you on the normal. It's always better. So here it is. It's very subtle, but you know, it makes the difference. And here, here is the result. I'll talk about it later, but the gold mask there is just my metallic mask that I use to remove noises from the gold parts on my height, because just wanted to have flat surfaces on my gold elements, and just keep all the erosion effect on the carved bare leaf. All right, so the normal is there. I'm gonna talk about the albedo now. So as you can see, all this part of the graph is just to make the height map. All right, and it's very important to spend time on it, because this is what you're gonna use to create the other channel. So I started like that for the albedo. Just, you know, I go back in my graph and I grab some mask. Just here, I just wanted to separate the different elements. So the skulls are lighter than the rest. Just defining simple colors. Here I'm adding some curvature on top of it, just to add some more some small information. And then I'm just gonna show you there. I start to play around with a generator. So this generator are from Substance Painter, basically. And when you feed the information required in it, like here, the dirt node. So here is what I get when I plug my curvature, my ambient occlusion, and my word space normal in it.
And where are you getting the curvature from?
Well, sorry, the curvature is extracted from my normal.
Okay.
And for the ambient occlusion, it's extracted from my height map. So you have just an AO node in Designer. So here it is. And to get your occlusion, you just need to connect your height into it.
Okay.
And you get the occlusion.
All right. So each one of those is going to have a different input. So AO just needs height. Curvature needs your normal map.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this generator needs different information, so depending of what you want. But here I'm playing around with a couple of these generators. So I'm creating mask, then I'm using to add more colors in my albedo. So it was like that, and I add this brownish dirt on top of it. Here I'm adding some green information using this mask. Here I'm having this, and once again, I'm just going to show you the look of the mask that I'm creating. So I'm creating this effect with the leaks generator, and using just a simple color that I'm adding on top. Get this. Here again, I'm adding more details using this generator. So it's an edge dirt. The next one is an edge wear. And once again here, just using other colors. This one is more subtle, but you can still see it slightly. Add some. Here again, I'm using an edge notch generator. And here, I'm just using a sun bleach to lighten just the top part of my elements, to highlight slightly the top of my elements. So before, after. So here I'm just using a node called HSL, like in hue saturation level, like in Photoshop, to just change slightly the value and reblend it after. All right. So on top of that, just adding some leaks with this grunge map.
What do you mean by leaks? Do you mean like just liquid and fluid coming down, or?
Oh no, I mean, yeah, I use this grunge map to add some sort of, you know, leaks on top of my on top of my column.
Totally.
Like if it was outside and it was, you know, raining or whatever, you know, it's just to give some sort of storytelling or something. And here I'm adding the gold. So I just played around with the fractal some base. So it's just a noise, the name of the noise. Then I'm combining into a gradient map. So here I'm picking different yellowish value. Then I'm combining with my ambient occlusion. Then I invert and I use as a mask there, just to have like darker areas. And here's what I have for the gold part. For the gems, it's pretty simple. I just faking the effect that you have when you're looking at a gem. Just combining a cell. So it's just a noise called cells 4. And I'm blending it in multiply with a very saturated color, flat color. And yeah, here's the result. I do the same with a green one. And I create a quick mask just to alternate the both. And here I'm just adding some dark color for the center row. And we're done with the albedo. So here it is. And yeah, last one is the roughness. So to make the roughness, just wanted to do a quick reminder. So in the roughness, the closer the texture is to white, the more it's rough and matte. And if the texture is closer to black, the material is smoother. So with this in mind, you can see that the lighter information are gonna be like more around your elements. You know, it's gonna be smoother on the top part because here it's normally more rough where you have the dirt. Not sure to be clear, but I'm trying to make it smoother on the flat surface and more rough in the holes. So here I'm subtracting my metallic parts. So there, and I'm just adding little details. So here I'm just playing with grunge map that I'm adding on top of each other just to create variation. And to get this result, I forgot to mention it before, but I'm just, you know, using some mask that I have that come from my height or my normal. But the grayscale values correspond to my height, so everything match properly. So here I'm just adding some grunge to add more details, and here I'm just adjusting the values for the gems just to have a flat colors. And here's the roughness. And to finish, I can show you the metallic. So the metallic is just a black and white mask where black is dielectrics and white is metallic. So basically dielectrics is just non-metallic elements. So here we have stones, so it's not metallic. For the gems, it's a bit an exception, but it works pretty well like that. So yep, we're almost done. I'm just playing around with my normal here just to I boost out the gemstones to increase the reflection. So I'm just increasing the value, and as you can see, I'm just yeah, here it's visible there.
You're pushing like almost like they're more depth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the facets differ from each other, and the reflection is boosted. So here is the normal that we have, and just to showcase the material now, I think it can be cool to show you what it looks like in marmosets. So here is what we have. So we have tessellation. So it's just a 4K map. Just gonna boost a bit the tessellation. So here is what we have now. So as you can see, I have a lot of polygons, and I'm using displacement here, and by reading the grayscale information from the height map, we get this this volume. So it's just a cylinder. So if I just turn off the tessellation, I already have a small value on it, but yeah, here is what you got in marmoset. Yep. Here it is. Don't know if you have any questions or yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure we got a ton. But let's, because we have taken up a good chunk of your valuable time. Let me get a quick note from you guys real quick. Let's get just a couple of questions in. And then don't forget, in fact, Jonathan, actually, do you want to head over, show us your ArtStation real quick so people know how to find you? And
Oh yeah, sure.
Jonathan is heavy on the teaching end of the spectrum. So, you can head over there. You see he's got some Gumroads, and he's actually got a bit of a tutorial on what he just went through as well. And he's in 3D Artist, so you can find out more information there. But if you want to learn more about Jonathan, you head over to ArtStation / Jonathan underscore. And how do I say your last name, Jonathan?
Benainous.
Benainous. Okay.
Yeah, I know it's not easy to say, but
not for the American tongue. I'm sure it's fine for you. Okay, so let's get these questions going. ZBrush to designer. Daniel really wants to see ZBrush to designer to final result. Okay, can look at something like that. Jeff, do you unwrap based on your texture material, or do you lay out your UVs first, then create your texture material? Or is it situational?
Well, it can be situational, but usually I make my 3D based on my textures. So basically, if I had to use this texture as a trim texture, I could have I could map just this cornice on a part of my mesh, then this area and another part. I'm not forced to use it in this order. I
Yeah,
can definitely.
We were wondering if this is almost like a trim sheet to some extent.
Yeah, it can be used as a trim texture, definitely. So you can crop there and just use this center line.
Mm-hmm.
But for that studio, I was like, okay, I want to create a cool composition directly. But if I want to reuse this to build a facade, for example, I think it could be possible,
Cool. Ira's asking, did you have a concept in mind, or did you just kind of start and go with it?
Well, I didn't really have a concept. I can show you a couple of references that I had. So,
have you been to the one in the Czech Republic?
Oh no, I didn't have that chance, but I would love to.
Yeah, I when I lived there in Prague, we actually went out one time.
Oh, great!
Pretty crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy when I saw that. I was like, okay, so basically they're using bones to make architecture.
Yeah, it was nuts. I have no idea how that fit into the Judeo-Christian religion, but anyways, it was pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
Robert is asking, is tessellation geometry generated from the height map? And he's just looking for a little more information on the concept of tessellation, I guess is what we'd call it.
Well, basically, tessellation is the fact of subdividing something. So here, when you're increasing the tessellation, you're just increasing the amount of points and the amount of polygons. The displacement is the fact of interpreting grayscale information to create volumes. So this is how you get the volume that you have here. So by increasing the scale there, you can see what happened. So you need to just set up the correct value. But here,
is it fair to say that displacement is kind of a pushing out, whereas tessellation is actually determining how many polygons there are to push out?
The tessellation is just the fact to subdivide something.
Yeah.
Basically, it's just the amount of points and polygons. But the displacement use the height map. So the the white elements are going to be the peaks, and the black are going to be the valleys. So this is how it creates these volumes.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, let me check any more questions. Isaac, in a studio production environment, how much time is usually given to environment and or texture artist to create a substance texture?
Well, it depends of the sort of texture that you need to produce. If it's a realistic one, you can spend a week on it. But if it's something more cartoony, you can make a texture in a day or two, or in 2 days. It really depends of what you need to do and how complicated the texture is.
Got it. And this is a question I got for you. So with the, because I saw you sculpted some rocks in ZBrush back in the day.
Yeah.
Now with Substance, is that something that you do much of, or is a lot of it just find something that's cool in Substance Designer?
Well, I'm experimenting a lot with Designer now,
Mm-hmm.
but I could definitely go back to my ZTL file and grab some height map from it and play in a tile sampler. But I find it just funnier to find how to reproduce this sort of shape in Designer now.
Right.
Because I know that I can spend time to, in ZBrush to sculpt these rocks, but it's always a challenge to get the same result in Designer. So yeah, I just find it funnier to make it in Designer now.
Cool. All right, and wait, I think there was one more question. Yes, so Frank. Okay, Frank's got a question. From a learning perspective, is there a runway for learning Designer that you'd recommend so that we eventually reach the level of complexity that you've achieved? So I think by runway, do you mean a source of information, Frank? Like hit up this guy on YouTube or hit up this Gumroad. And keep in mind, guys, Jonathan has Gumroads, so you can head over to his art station. You can see his Gumroads there. I think I actually have this Gumroad, if I remember right.
Yeah, well, yeah, you can find this file in Gumroad. It's available there, and you have comments and everything in the file. But when I started to learn Designer, I was just looking. I was just watching all the different tutorials that I could find on the internet. All the videos from Allegorithmic showing all the nodes are very interesting. You have many artists who were making an amazing job at showing how to create materials, like Daniel Tiger or Josh Lynch. You have many very good artists in Designer that make awesome realistic stuff. I think it's just about watching videos and experimenting by yourself. It's always good to make tutorials, to watch videos, and to experiment.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that's really important, Frank, you also teach, so you're familiar with like the process of learning and how to kind of hack learning. I'm sure. So for me, one of the things that I learned today was really the power of structure. So it's like Jonathan's Substance Designer. It's first structural element he established was that profile of the column, and then everything from that point on was structured so that he could go back and say, okay, these are all the skulls. I'm only going to apply, this thing to skulls. And so having it be this structured, to me, just seemed crazy powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's game changer in game production now.
That's good. I've talked to people who say, because some people can, and I understand it, but gamers and artists can be a little cynical because there's so much learning that has to happen. So I've talked to a couple of people and they're like, yeah, Substance was, but there's going to be something else in 30 days that you have to learn. So maybe it's not so important. But my assumption is that if you learn substance, it moves the needle on your career. Like it's a powerful thing, and it increases your chances of a job significantly. Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's like ZBrush for me.
Yeah.
You can't if you want to work in the video game industry, uh you need to learn ZBrush. You need to learn at least a bit of Substance Designer. You need to learn Substance Painter, and you definitely need to learn 3ds Max or Maya.
Yeah.
That's for sure, and even Photoshop, because it's still useful to know how to use it.
Great. All right, Jonathan. Thank you so much for your generosity and for your time.
Well,
And
thanks a lot. Thanks to you.
absolutely, and for walking us through this. Is brilliant. This is really just an amazing work. I think this is one of the most powerful pieces I've seen done in Substance Designer that showcases how powerful that program really is. Great job.
Well, thanks a lot, Ryan.
Yeah.
It's cool.
All right,
Glad
my
you liked
friend.
it.
I'll touch base with you after a little later on what we'll end up with this video. But for those of you guys who are in the November boot camp, remember there's no class today, but you have March in. And then for all my other boot campers, you got your regular classes. You got classes on Thursday for the most part. If you got any questions, you guys know where to find me. And once we post this, make sure you send up or post up one thing that you've learned today, so that I can make sure that we're giving you guys value and that this is making a difference in your lives. And I know I'm learning something from every single one of these. So thank you guys for tuning in, Jonathan. Thank you so much again, man. Really great.
Thanks, Ryan. Thank you, guys. Bye.
All right, take care. Bye.